A single step. That's all it took for silence to fall over the room. Cameras froze, the audience gasped, and the woman who once ruled the fashion world on screen stumbled in real life. Anne Hathaway, star of The Devil Wears Prada, tripped and, in that moment, nobody knew what would happen next. Would this be remembered as a fall from grace or the beginning of something unforgettable? The story begins not with the trip itself, but with the anticipation that filled the air long before. The Devil Wears Prada was not just a movie, it was a cultural moment. Released years ago, it carved its place in cinema history as a sharp, stylish tale about ambition, sacrifice, and the cruel elegance of the fashion industry. At the heart of it all was Anne Hathaway, who transformed from the wide-eyed assistant Andrea Sachs into a character audiences around the world rooted for. Her journey from clumsy to confident mirrored the dreams of so many viewers. That's why the whispers of a sequel, The Devil Wears Prada 2, carried more than just excitement. They carried weight. Expectations were sky-high, and fans were hungry to see what came next. For weeks, social media buzzed with speculation. What would the new story be? Would Miranda Priestly return in all her icy glory? And how would Hathaway, now an accomplished actress with decades of experience, step back into the shoes that first launched her into superstardom? The stage was set not in the fictional world of Runway magazine, but in the very real world of press events and red carpets. It was at one of these gatherings, under blinding lights and endless flashes of cameras, that the moment unfolded. Every eye in the room was on Hathaway. She appeared poised, elegant, dressed in a gown that shimmered like liquid silver. Her smile lit up the venue, her presence commanding yet warm. The reporters leaned forward. The photographers adjusted their lenses. Fans craned their necks just for a glimpse. This wasn't just another press appearance, it felt like a coronation. The actress who once played the intern was now the queen. Every movement she made seemed deliberate, a dance choreographed for the stage of public admiration. Yet beneath all that glamour, reality always lingers. After all, even stars are human. And it was in the middle of this carefully built perfection that imperfection slipped in and took a step forward. A single step. Maybe her heel caught on the carpet, or maybe the floor was uneven. No one could say for sure. What everyone could agree on was what they saw. Anne Hathaway tripped. For the smallest fraction of a second, the world seemed to stop. Gasps filled the air like a sudden wind. The music of camera shutters went silent. People froze, holding their breath. In that instant, every headline flashed across people's minds: Anne Hathaway falls at Prada 2 premiere. The perfect image shattered in one clumsy movement, but the power of the moment wasn't in the stumble itself. It was in what came after. Because while most people might collapse, panic, or hide from embarrassment, Anne Hathaway did something different. She didn't just fall. She transformed the trip into something unforgettable. Something that would turn a near disaster into a symbol of grace and strength. The audience was about to learn a lesson that no script could teach, no director could stage, and no stylist could design. A lesson about what happens when real life collides with the perfection of fame, and how one woman turned a stumble into a statement. The moment arrived with no warning. 1 second, Anne Hathaway was gliding forward, her gown catching the glow of the lights like a river of silver silk. The next, everything shifted. Her heel, sharp and delicate, found the edge of a carpet fold. Time seemed to warp. Her ankle wavered, her balance slipped. And gravity, the one force no star can outshine, pulled her down. It wasn't a dramatic crash. Not the kind of fall that sends people sprawling. It was something far smaller, almost delicate. A stumble. A dip, a sudden loss of footing that carried with it all the weight of public spectacle. But sometimes it's the small slips that feel the heaviest. And in that room filled with reporters, fans, and flashing bulbs, Anne Hathaway's stumble was louder than thunder. Gasps echoed across the hall. One journalist dropped his pen. Another raised her phone instinctively higher, desperate to catch the moment. The cameras did not hesitate. They clicked furiously, hundreds of tiny explosions capturing every angle, every frame of her slip. For, though standing close, It was as if the entire atmosphere shifted in a heartbeat from polished glamour to the fragile awkwardness of reality. In the crowd, whispers began. Did she just trip? Is she okay? Oh my God, this will be everywhere. The world of fashion, always quick to judge, sharpened its teeth. A stumble could mean headlines. A fall could mean ridicule. And in the age of social media, a 2-second misstep could overshadow a 2-decade career. For Anne, the moment must have stretched into eternity. She, who had spent years mastering red carpets, learning how to walk in heels designed more for art than comfort, suddenly found herself fighting for balance. One hand reached slightly outward, instinctively, as though to catch the air itself. Her hair swung forward, her gown twisted around her knees, and her weight shifted. A second more, and she would have crashed onto the floor, but somehow through grace, instinct, or sheer will she caught herself. Her heel scraped against the floor, her legs steadied, and she froze for half a heartbeat in a half-crouch, neither fallen nor standing tall. It was a fragile, fleeting image, the queen of poise caught in a human moment of uncertainty. And yet, even before she fully straightened herself, the cameras had already captured it. That instant, that stumble, was immortalized. Within minutes, it would race across screens around the world. Within hours, it would be dissected, memed, praised, or mocked. But in that room, in that second, none of that mattered yet. All that mattered was the silence, the breathless pause as the world waited to see what Anne Hathaway would do next. Some faces in the crowd wore shock. Others, the cruel flicker of excitement. For in the theater of celebrity, flaws are entertainment. The fall of a star is as captivating as their rise. And here, live in front of lenses and flashing bulbs, was a scene that no director could have planned. The anticipation was electric. Would she crumble? Would she hide her face in shame? Wool. Did she walk off the stage, her confidence shattered? But there was also something else in the air, a kind of empathy. Many watching knew the truth. Who hasn't stumbled before? Who hasn't felt the floor betray them at the worst possible moment? In Hathaway's stumble, there was something human, something fragile. That made the room lean in closer, as though witnessing not just a star, but a person caught in the raw reality of imperfection. The stumble was over in seconds, but its impact stretched far beyond. And Hathaway's every move after this moment would decide the story. She could either let it define her, or she could redefine it herself. And so, as she straightened, shoulders lifting, chin rising, eyes flashing with determination, it became clear this was no ordinary fall. This was a turning point. The cameras weren't just waiting to capture a mistake anymore. They were waiting to capture history. Because what Anne Hathaway did next would not only silence her critics, it would shock everyone watching. Asterisk for a heartbeat, Anne Hathaway stood suspended between disaster and dignity. The air around her still quivered with shock. The crowd hushed as if the entire room held its breath. In that pause, countless possibilities hung in the balance. She could have chosen shame-hurried steps, lowered eyes, a forced smile masking embarrassment. She could have retreated, escaping the glare of judgment before the headlines were written. But Anne Hathaway, seasoned by years of both Hollywood glamour and Hollywood scrutiny, chose differently. Her hand brushed lightly against her gown, smoothing it down as though nothing had happened at all. Then came the smile. Not the rehearsed, picture-perfect red carpet smile, but one that broke through with warmth and defiance. The kind of smile that says, "Yes, I stumbled. And yes, I am still standing." The crowd felt the shift immediately. A ripple moved through the hall. Gasps turned into relieved laughter. The tension cracked open, replaced by something far more powerful. Admiration. Instead of hiding, she leaned into the moment. She lifted her chin, flashed a glint of humor in her eyes, and with perfect timing, quipped a line that only she could deliver. Miranda Priestley would definitely not approve. The reference was subtle but sharp, instantly pulling everyone back to the world of The Devil Wears Prada. The audience roared. Cameras flashed again, not to catch her stumble, but to catch her brilliance in recovery. It was a masterclass in control, and Hathaway transformed a flaw into performance, weaving vulnerability into confidence. The stumble became a stage, and her reaction became the show. It was as if she had rehearsed it, though everyone knew she hadn't. This was instinct, pure and unfiltered. Years of experience in front of cameras, years of living under the microscope, all condensed into one flawless reaction. For the fans, it was electric. Phones lit up instantly, tweets and posts flying out across the digital world. Anne Hathaway just turned a trip into the most iconic moment of the night. Clips spread like wildfire, each frame capturing her grace in motion. Instead of humiliation, she was celebrated. Instead of weakness, she showed strength. What could have been a headline about failure became a viral story of resilience. Even fellow actors and celebrities, watching from the sidelines, couldn't help but applaud. Some clapped openly, others leaned toward each other with nods of respect. They understood the pressure of such moments. They knew how easy it is for a stumble to turn into a scandal. But Hathaway had done the impossible. She had shifted the narrative before it even began. Her recovery wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. By choosing laughter over embarrassment, by choosing to own the stumble rather than hide from it, she reminded everyone of something vital. Perfection is overrated. What truly matters is authenticity. And in that moment, Anne Hathaway wasn't just the polished actress, the glamorous star. She was human, real, flawed, resilient. And that made her shine even brighter. The applause began to grow, not the formal claps of a staged event, but genuine, heartfelt claps that rose from the crowd. Some stood, others cheered, and the energy shifted completely. What began as silence born of shock transformed into noise born of admiration. She had not only caught herself from falling, she had lifted the entire room with her. By the time she continued walking, her steps were deliberate, steady, and strong. Each stride felt like a declaration. A stumble will not define me. The gown shimmered, the camera snapped, but now the narrative had changed. No one was watching for mistakes anymore. They were watching for greatness. And in a way, Anne Hathaway had given them something far more memorable than a flawless walk down a carpet. She had given them a story, a moment of drama, comedy, and triumph rolled into one. Something unscripted, unplanned, but undeniably iconic. Because sometimes the most powerful performances don't happen on set. They happen in real life, in the blink of an eye, when everything threatens to collapse. And Anne Hathaway, in that moment, showed the world that even when the floor shifts beneath you, you can rise higher than ever before. What she did wasn't just recovery, it was reinvention. The moment Anne Hathaway steadied herself, the story should have ended there. A stumble, a recovery, a smile, life goes on. But in the modern world, nothing ends when the cameras are rolling. The true story began the second the clips left that hall and spilled onto glowing screens across the globe. Within minutes, phones lit up. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, every platform exploded with the same video. Anne Hathaway, the star of The Devil Wears Prada, tripping, smiling, and delivering a flawless recovery. At first, the captions were simple, and stumbles at Prada 2 event, but quickly they evolved. Viewers weren't mocking. They were celebrating. Queen energy, she owned that stumble. The way she turned it into a Miranda Priestley joke, legendary. Hashtag surged, hashtag NSLAYS, hashtag Prada 2 premiere, hashtag Grace in Heels. The stumble, instead of being framed as a humiliation, became a viral lesson in confidence. Overnight, millions watched and rewatched the clip. Some slowed it down, analyzing every flick of her hair, every movement of her smile. Others edited it with dramatic music, turning a 2-second trip into a cinematic masterpiece. What could have been a meme at her expense became a meme in her honor. Mainstream media followed just as fast. Headlines shifted from the predictable Anne trips at event to the more admiring, and Hathaway proves why she's still Hollywood's class act. Talk shows replayed the clip, not to laugh at her, but to admire the poise of her recovery. Anchors described it as the stumble seen around the world. Fashion magazines dissected it, noting how even in that awkward half-second, her gown maintained its elegance and her posture never fully broke. She had unintentionally turned a wardrobe crisis into a showcase of resilience. Other celebrities chimed in. A-list stars tweeted words of support. Only Anne could trip and still look iconic. Younger actors called it inspiring, proof that vulnerability could coexist with glamour. Even designers spoke up, praising her for reminding us that fashion is about movement, not perfection. For fans, it went deeper than entertainment. Many saw themselves in her stumble. They remembered moments of their own embarrassment, moments when the world seemed to watch them fall. Seeing Hathaway laugh it off and stand tall was more than charming, it was empowering. The stumble became a metaphor, a reminder that strength isn't about never tripping. It's about rising with style when you do. As the clip spread, so did the commentary. Psychologists wrote think pieces about why the public loved her reaction, calling it a rare display of authenticity in a world obsessed with flawlessness. Influencers created motivational edits, pairing her stumble with captions like, "Failure is not falling. Failure is refusing to rise." In classrooms, in offices, in late-night conversations, people shared the video not because they loved seeing a star fall, but because they loved seeing her rise. And then came the twist no one expected. The stumble boosted the film itself. Interest in The Devil Wears Prada 2 skyrocketed. Search trends soared, ticket pre-sales spiked, and marketing teams scrambled to ride the wave. The film, already one of the most anticipated releases of the year, suddenly became tied to a moment of real-world drama. It was as though the story had leapt off the screen and into life. Blurring the line between fiction and reality, The Stumble had become bigger than Anne Hathaway, bigger than the film, bigger than the event. It became a cultural flashpoint, a story told not with scripts or camera angles but with authenticity. A stumble that should have lasted only a few seconds lived on as a global conversation, and at the center of it all stood Anne Hathaway, not as the woman who tripped, but as the woman who showed the world how to rise. The media didn't just capture her fall, they captured her strength. The fans didn't just share her embarrassment, they shared her resilience. And in doing so, Anne Hathaway turned what could have been a fleeting mistake into a timeless lesson. Perfection may win applause, but authenticity wins hearts.